You are listening to Flop Culture. This is a pop culture podcast all about our favourite flops. I hope you're well. My name's Fionnuala. I will be your host this evening, afternoon, morning, whatever time you are listening at. Thank you so much to everyone who came out at Beyond the Pale last Saturday with myself and Shane Byrne playing Bop or Flop with some Irish food fads and trends and products that no longer exist. It was so much fun. It was so great to see all of you out there and appreciate your patience because we did run a little bit late, but you waited around and we had so much fun and I hope you did too. More live shows this year? I don't know. Watch this space maybe. In the meantime, let's get into the news. Normani. Dopamine is out. The album is out. It did happen. I actually still haven't listened yet. So this following news story, it's probably my fault. I haven't listened for any particular reason other than I just haven't really had time and I want to have the time to sink into it. From what I've heard from people that I love and respect, it is, by all accounts, a good album. A good album. Great reviews, 7.4 from Pitchfork. That's nothing to be sniffed at for your debut album. NME called it belated but brilliant. The lovely Michael Cragg, who's actually on the Patreon this week, patreon.com/flopculture. He gave 3 stars from The Guardian. Said it was also very, very good, worth the wait. Dopamine, Normani's debut album, debuted at 91 on the Billboard album chart, which is, by all accounts, guys, it's not great. I think we could cast it as a flop, girls. When you consider the hype, when you consider where she was as an artist, it's really disappointing. I'm sure she's disappointed. I'm disappointed for her. I will say I'm not sure how much she committed to the promotional campaign. It seemed like this was kind of an album where it was like, if you knew, you knew. This was very much for the chronically online people, and if you weren't chronically online, you had no idea Normani was still making music, potentially. She didn't seem very enthusiastic online promoting it. Even with like the kind of leaning into the meme culture of it all and the laugh of it all about how delayed it was, it just, I don't know. But then you look at other factors like her management, and like obviously this was an album, I'm pretty sure she had to release this under an RCA obligation. So like maybe she was just firing this out to be like, no, get the hell away from me, label, I hate you. But then I'm also like, is it her management? You look at this, there were no physical copies of the album available for purchase. And I do think that would have helped. No music videos. There was no performance. Unless you count the one she did of Wild Side a couple of years ago at something. But again, that was a couple of years ago. I think it's insane that Wild Side is not even on this album, I'm going to be honest. If you don't remember Wild Side, you're not the only one, girl. You're not the only one. It was a Cardi B collab. And then, like, I don't know. Maybe it's going back to this whole thing of, are we being too prescriptive of our pop stars? Is she happy? Does she want to be a niche girly? Maybe she doesn't want to be a main pop girl, because this is the whole point. All of the interviews she's done to promote this album, where she's kind of been thinly, veiledly saying, oh, I didn't like Motivation. I don't like Motivation. I'm not doing Motivation ever again. Soz. Like, soz, not soz. Maybe she wants to be a niche pop girly. Maybe this is where she kind of retreats into the shadows. Tinashe becomes main pop girl once again. Normani swaps. You know, I don't know. Do you like the album? Any favourite songs? Let me know. Where should I dig in? Yeah, I don't know. Will we be seeing Normani at Glastonbury this year? I don't think so, but I would love to see it. Maybe in a few years' time. And with Glastonbury kicking off this week, I could think of no better topic than this one. Glastonbury Festival, it remains one of the biggest music festivals in the world, consistently attracting big-name headliners as well as championing up-and-coming artists. Becoming a globally renowned music festival, though, means Glastonbury hasn't been without its fair share of difficult and controversial moments over the years. From riots in 1985 due to overcrowding and poor security management, the 1990 convoy battle, the many years where festival goers contended with adverse weather conditions, and of course, some disappointing headliners in between. Joining me to discuss Glastonbury's floppiest moments is content creator Dan Thomas. Dan Thomas, you are so welcome to Flop Culture. How are you?
Thank you, Fionnuala. I'm really well. I'm excited for the next few weeks, and we've all been looking forward to a bit of summer as well, haven't we? So it's a good time.
Absolutely, absolutely. A very exciting few weeks. We're in the thick of festival season, and I wanted to have you on Flap Culture to talk about one festival in particular that you make a
Yes.
lot of content around that I
Yes.
love, and I will link everything in the show notes to send people to your content around Glastonbury. It's just been a fascinating insight for me as a music fan, as someone who is a fan of Glastonbury from afar, who's never been, maybe will go someday, who knows. I've just been obsessed with your videos and learning about like the history of the festival and kind of things that I wouldn't have known previously. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your relationship to the festival, maybe festivals in general, and how you came to start making this content, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you. For some reason, I actually assumed that you'd already been, or I don't know how that was sort of
No,
conveyed. But
I'm a big festival head here, but haven't made the journey abroad to any. I almost went to Primavera this year and was talked out
right.
of it, but I will
I mean,
get there
those.
one of the years. One of the
I feel
years.
the same about those Irish festivals. They look amazing, actually, and so comparatively close. Yeah, so Glastonbury has been a big part of my life for, if you'll believe this, 20 years this year. Which is just bonkers to think of. And, almost every aspect of my life, I guess, has changed in some way in 20 years. I mean, why, how couldn't it? But I was introduced to Glastonbury 20 years ago. Like most people, I was kind of intrigued by the lineup. I was and still am a massive Beatles fan. Paul McCartney was playing that year, as were Oasis and Muse. I was a huge Muse fan as well. And so I kind of knew about the legend of Glastonbury, and, people talk about the atmosphere and all this sort of thing. But I think most people needed enough to be convinced to give it a go for their first time. And I was definitely one of those. Bought a ticket for me and a mate, which I think was £130. They're now 355.
Oh my
I know.
gosh.
And my mate then decided that he didn't want to come. And I was sort of stuck between, okay, do I cancel as well, or do I just go on my own, really? And this would be my first sort of camping away proper festival. I'd been to some day events and stuff, but it'd be my first real one. And I decided to just go. And in the classic case of all things that are worth doing, it was worth doing, but also I wondered what I was so worried about going on my own, because it was amazing. And actually, weirdly, being on my own makes you talk to people, makes you experience things, and also just makes you kind of do things a little bit on your own terms. I came back from that first festival, which was just so much bigger and so much more immersive and exciting, and, dare I say it, mind expanding than I imagined. And I had the strange feeling of coming away from that first year thinking, I don't care who's playing next year, I want to come. And a lot of people that go to Glastonbury have that feeling, and indeed do come back. There's a lot of kind of repeat offenders, I guess. Instead of coming back a second year, I ended up coming back 15 more times, and haven't taken one off since.
Oh my God. That's a feat. That's
It,
like, have you ever been tempted? Or is it just like, it's a testament to the success of the festival that you're like, I have to go every year. And especially if it's like a lineup that maybe you're like not super interested in or not super familiar with, that you're like, no, I'm going, I'll be there.
Yeah. Well, I think going in the knowledge that you'll like it when you get there is a big part of it. And this will actually surprise a lot of people, but I don't always look forward, or I'm not always excited about Glastonbury before I get there. I go with the knowledge that when I get there, I will love it.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a really weird thing to say. I've made maybe 400 videos on TikTok and Instagram, probably half of them or more about Glastonbury itself. 1 week a year to make videos about. You'd think that there'd be only so much you can say about it, but no, you can go on about it for years. But still, in the weeks leading up to it, weirdly, I am excited this year, but most years I'm sort of not. I'm looking forward with the understanding that when I get there, I will love it, and it will end up being one of the best weeks of my year. And it almost always is. In fact, I'd say it always is. So and when it comes to the lineups, there's 1,000 acts on the lineup. There's 100 stages. Needless to say, some years you'll be more up for a spread of things on that lineup than others. And actually, weirdly for me, this isn't a lineup year for me. Last year really was. And so that's actually quite freeing in a way, because Glastonbury has all of these, what I call the other things, the things which aren't stood in front of a marquee or stood in front of a stage watching music, which for people who haven't actually been to the festival, I would say are in terms of just square feet, probably bigger or as big as the areas that have stages on them. And you don't really see that on telly. So much as people might think that Glastonbury is amazingly well televised, and in some ways musically it is, I'd say the things that people actually go there for to do at Glastonbury and to see outside of the music aren't televised. And it's the knowledge that all of that will still be there, and that community spirit and that atmosphere and the vibe and all of those other kind of things which apply to other events can sometimes be a little bit cliched. So yeah, actually Glastonbury is what it's cracked up to be.
Is that why you think it's been so successful? Is it the mix of, like, obviously the music, that community spirit thing you're on about, and just the fact that you can kind of go there and discover lots of other things happening that you would never experience in normal life, that it just has that unique kind of X factor, can't put your finger on it, takes place over that weekend, never happens again, potentially, or won't happen again until next year? Is that the secret sauce for it?
No one would plan a festival like Glastonbury today. If you were starting a new festival, you wouldn't put it where it is in the world, with the kind of the limited transport links, with the a sort of hilly, kind of relatively inaccessible farm with all of these other things around it. But because no one sane would plan it that way, and because it's been allowed to grow organically and have all of these kind of trials and tribulations and, trial and error that's gotten them to where they are today, it has that atmosphere, it has that magic. I don't really believe in places being fundamentally magic or having special powers, but Glastonbury is probably the one exception that I'd give to that, because it's one place that just seems to keep changing my life for the better, changing hundreds of thousands of other people's lives for the better. And because there's so many combinations of things that you can do there. If you think you've got 100 stages, 1,000 acts, a load of things which aren't stages, you've got 200,000 people there. And in some ways, I think there are 200,000 individual festivals happening because of all the different combinations and things that you could do for each person. But they're all coming back amazingly happy and wanting to do it again next year. And just the odds, I think, of that ever being successful are infinitesimally small. And that's why I think no one with the means to do so would plan a festival like that today. And it's a triumph of instinct over logic.
Yeah, when you put it like that, even just maths wise, like odds wise, it's kind of phenomenal.
Yeah. And when you look at, things that have generally come since, like the Reading Festival, even though I think actually Reading might predate Glastonbury, but I think where it is now, it's sort of in a kind of purpose-built site, and there's car parking, and there's sort of a train station quite close by, and all of that sort of thing. And Glastonbury doesn't have any of that. So the train station's a few miles away, and then shuttle bus, and they have to rent car parking space off neighbouring farms, and everyone's trying to squeeze into a single lane country road to get out on the Monday morning kind of thing. You just wouldn't plan anything of that size, with the world's eyes on it in that kind of location. And like most things that are actually ultimately worth having, they didn't sit down and go, right, we're going to be big, how do we make it big? They just said, we're going to make something enjoyable and follow our hearts and keep doing so, and keep doing so against, deal with, local residents who may not particularly enjoy it, having to deal with local councils, police, always welcomed by the powers that be. But, at the same time, I think it was at the start of this year that the organizer and founder, Michael Eavis, got knighted. And I think of all people that have that sort of lifetime achievement that means that you become a sir, I think he's definitely one of them.
For sure. With a festival as successful and as long running as Glastonbury, though, like not every year can be a banger, right? It just can't. So we talk about odds, we talk about maths, it just can't. And to be honest, that's the content that I initially found from you, was some of the quote unquote bad years for various reasons. Weather, acts, whatever else. Let's talk about some of the flop years that kind of stand out to you with
let's get into the
Glastonbury.
flops.
Let's get into the flops. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about the years that didn't go off maybe necessarily without a hitch, whether it was music, whether it was weather. I'm wondering if there's one in particular that sticks out to you.
Yeah, I mean, there are 3 that I've done highlight videos on. And they weirdly were 3 in a row, which must have been particularly trying for the festival. The festival's been going since 1970, but I've personally witnessed 3 of the trying years, which were in order: 2005, 2007, and 2008. There wasn't a festival in 2006. So they did 3 consecutive years that had issues, nothing drastic, no sort of life and death type issues. But I guess they could be summarized by 2 years of terrible weather, and then that contributing with credit crunch and recession to the festival sort of not selling out on the 3rd of those years. So 2005, it was my 2nd year there. So I'd come back from that 2004 festival thinking, oh, that was amazing. I'd love to do that again. It was all nice and sunny and everything was lovely. And instead, it was just kind of biblical downpour of rain. And you have to look at the photos to truly believe this. And hopefully you'll cut in one of those photos on your video.
I absolutely will, because it needs to be seen to be believed. It's like Noah's Ark stuff.
Yes. So on your screen now, you'll see a montage of photos from Glastonbury 2005. And the rainwater is above the level of the tents. So if you think of one of those dome tents that's like maybe a meter tall, 1.5 meters tall, the water is above that. And you can just see the little tippy top of the tent sticking out. And there's people kayaking around the website. God knows where they got the kayaks from.
Yeah, good planning on their part.
Yeah, there's toilets bobbing up and down. And that didn't happen right across the site, but it did happen in the field that I was in. And to the extent that this new river that formed its way through the campsite was, previously there'd been tents in that space. Now there was a river. It looked like the EastEnders kind of titles, And my tent was just right up against that river with it sort of lapping against the entrance of my tent. So a lot of people that year just had their stuff washed away. They might have been out and then come back to an absolute nightmare. Or they might have, been able to wake up in time and get their stuff out of the way. But you could just see people's clothes and stuff just going down this river. And, and there were stories of people losing their car keys in it and stuff. And it just...
Oh, my God.
It was horrendous. Yeah. And I think it happened... I seem to remember it happening reasonably sort of in the middle of the festival. So we still had a couple more days. And you'd be walking around the site in like 1.5 feet of water. And there were bins bobbing up and down. And... people that hadn't brought wellies suddenly descended on the camping shops, and obviously they sold out in 5 minutes. And so if you didn't have wellies, you were walking around in 1 foot of water in God knows what trainers. And, it was, in a weird way, it was a bit of a mixed blessing. Obviously, you've got the very obvious consequence of the place being flooded, right? But also, because of the atmosphere, vibe, all those kind of platitudes that I mentioned earlier, or cliches, stereotypes, it managed to cope with all of those things. And then once you've done one of those years, you no longer worry about the weather again. Because now I've seen it at its worst. And I still wanted to come back, even though, I probably spent 3 days not even being able to find a clean patch of grass to sit on. And, mud and crap everywhere. And then you get in the car and it was all inside your car and everything. If that had happened at any other festival where it's just I could call it a beer and burgers festival, where you just go, you buy some food, have a beer, watch an act, go home. If that had happened at any other festival, I would not ever want to come again. But I think people came away from Glastonbury 2005 thinking, okay, that was a bit of a trial, but we're still up for it. And, the atmosphere was amazing. And it kind of like, we have a phrase over here, Dunkirk spirit, that sort of comes from the war and, people having to fight in horrible conditions and things. Well, I think it's, entirely kind of applicable to that. But you get the idea. People just sort of pulled together and got through it. And then we thought, well, at least it won't happen again. And then we came back the next year and it just rained for the whole week. So they'd improved the kind of the draining so that the water would drain away from the campsites, which they didn't really have before, but you couldn't stop it falling out of the sky. So we had 2 years on the bounce where the weather was terrible, but we still kept coming.
There you go. Was 2008 the same then weather-wise?
So '08, I don't think did have the bad weather, but it had had 2 years of, I guess, that flop getting into the news. So, Glastonbury is really high demand at the moment, but back in the mid 2000s, people had seen 2 consecutive years of people just, diving around in mud and being covered in mud from head to toe, and, the water above the tents and all that sort of thing. So already in the public perception, you've got that kind of, Glastonbury, the weather's always terrible. That's what I thought about it, seeing it on telly in the 90s, because right through the 90s, they had loads of terrible weather years as well. And I thought, well, I'm never going to go to that. It's funny how things change. And so they had this 2 years of terrible weather for coverage. And then in 2008, you also had the pinch of what we called the credit crunch or the Great Recession and all those kinds of things where, no one had £2 to rub together anyway. So for that reason, this is hard to imagine now, but the festival just didn't sell out. And for months and months, you could buy a ticket at any time, whereas now it sells out in like half an hour or something.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about.
Yeah, those 3 things, 2 bad years of weather and a credit crunch were enough to do that. And it goes to show how they can't take for granted the idea that people will just queue up in their droves to buy it, because for a number of reasons that are internal and external to the festival, the tide comes in and the tide goes out quite literally in that year, but also in terms of people's interest, their ability to invest, all kinds of other reasons. So they don't take for granted the idea that it will just sell every time. And that's why, even though it seems like a weird thing to sort of promote when it sells out so quickly, I think, we all remember a time when it very nearly didn't. And if they said at the time, if we have another year like that, we may not be able to keep running, because they felt that they didn't sell enough tickets to make it worth doing. Or that they may not have done. I think they finally sold out on the first day, and it's kind of unusual for Glastonbury, but I think you could buy tickets on the door, which you just wouldn't be able to do today.
Crazy. How quickly did it sell out this year? Because I know, like, Coachella, a totally different beast, I will admit, but even like this year you were seeing like Coachella didn't sell out, and or I think it did eventually, but again took ages to sell out. The second weekend didn't, so people were kind of thinking, what's going on there? Glastonbury was okay this year, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think they sold out in about probably 25, 30 minutes or something, which is kind of the usual these days.
Yeah.
But, we could have a terrible weather year again. I'm not wishing that it'll happen, but I think we've had so many good ones on the bounce that at some point it's going to come. And, that could end up affecting things for the year afterwards. And next year is the last one that they're doing before having a year off. So it'll be kind of all eyes on 2025, I guess.
Yeah.
Obviously I hope that it has great weather, and I hope that it, sells really healthily as well. But it has been up and down over the years. And like I say, that tide will go out again.
Let's talk music then. Obviously, headliners, huge conversation around all festivals, particularly with Glastonbury. I have very specific memories of watching the Kanye West set that year that he was headlining and being just so excited, anticipating it hugely, thinking this is going to be incredible. Obviously, I should note for listeners, I know most of you will know, but this was pre-Kanye being, in inverted commas, the way he is now. This is him being a genuinely exciting artist and maybe not a terrible person, ? But anyway,
I was relatively normal, although I don't think he was thought of as such at the time. But he was relatively adjusted individual in 2008. What was it? 2009, something like that. Yeah.
I was ravenous for this set, though. I was like, this is going to be really interesting. It was kind of a bit different for Glastonbury in terms of this huge American rapper and hip hop on the main stage. And I came away from it and was like, that was fine. That was not
that was
great.
A concert. Yeah.
That was a concert.
And it felt like that at the time.
Did you see it live?
I was there. Yeah, I was there. I was there. And I'd seen him before, because I'd seen him play V Festival, I think. And I really enjoyed that. And I had a whole summer where his first album, The College Dropout, came out. And I just listened to that album from start to finish on my bike. I'd just got an iPod, so iPods were new. So I guess this was 2003. And I went out on this bike and listened to The College Dropout from start to finish every single day. And so to see him live, I was really excited about. And I already had done once, and I thought this will be great again. And it was a lot more of like almost like a conceptual performance piece. And I guess it was like a sort of a preview of the kind of artist that he would go on to become, in terms of, I don't just get up and do the songs and go. Like it's an experience, and I'm an artist. And,
Yeah.
I think he's sort of, and in some ways could be considered a polymath, or as well as a number of other things. But it was, it was kind of a lot more conceptual. And coming on and doing, like, singing Bohemian Rhapsody and sort of various other things happened in that set. And you wouldn't have believed it. And, there were some, in terms of momentum and the flow of that set, I do remember it kind of coming and going, and him coming on stage and going, "You are now witnessing the biggest rock star in the world." And, the Glastonbury crowd maybe not entirely agreeing with that assessment. And, all these crazy things going on with the lights. So, it was interesting. And that, I think, the reason that performance could happen was because of Jay-Z kind of knocking down the door before. And actually, I probably should have mentioned that as part of 2008. This was considered a big controversy at the time, and also contributed to potentially to the tickets not selling out as well as they could have done, which was that Jay-Z was considered not a Glastonbury headliner. Now, I think if he was to do it today, people would welcome him with open arms, and it just wouldn't be a thing. And they go, "Oh, wow, Jay-Z, amazing." Yeah. So, but in 2008, it was like, "Oh, he doesn't play guitar."
Because again, for anyone who's not super familiar with Glastonbury, like, it was considered like a quote unquote rock and roll festival, white lads with guitars, rappers. It was kind of like,
and there was a bit of other genres around, but there was a sort of an unspoken, not on the main stage at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
And whereas now, you've had Kanye, you've had Stormzy, you've got all kinds of other sort of rappers and hip hop and all that sort of thing. But it took, and they'd had a little bit of hip hop in the past, but much lower down the lineup. And it took Jay-Z to sort of knock that door down. And then Kanye came in, I'm pretty sure, the year after.
With that in mind, does anyone else stick out for you then in terms of headliners that, like, weren't super successful? Either you saw them and they were kind of disappointing, or like the general consensus was that they weren't good, or maybe there was a lot of hype behind them, and then like Kanye maybe didn't deliver over the weekend. Does anyone else stick out for you?
So weirdly, in terms of headliners that felt odd at the time or didn't quite hit the mark, for me, it's Gorillaz. Now, Gorillaz have got a number of massive hits. Feel Good Inc. and all that sort of thing. But they have 2 hours worth of hits. I didn't think that they did. And so outside of those songs, the atmosphere felt a little bit odd at times. And I think they've gone on to do better gigs, more engaging gigs since. But I do remember seeing a lot of people kind of looking a little bit perplexed and walking away at the time. And also there wasn't sort of too much to see because they are sort of a cartoon.
Yeah. Okay. Gorillaz makes sense because, like, I've seen them live before and I've really enjoyed it. But as you said, it's 2 hours. There's not a lot to look at from a festival perspective. But you say, to even talk about this year, okay, they have to fill out 2 hours of a set generally. Is Dua Lipa not headlining this year? Is she going to be able to fill out 2 hours?
I think Dua Lipa will probably provide the biggest Glastonbury TV moment, if we like, this year. Because I actually made a video about this. This was when Dua Lipa was being rumoured and people were commenting, "Oh, we can't have Dua Lipa headlining." I actually looked into it, and I think Dua Lipa has more hits than people give her credit for. Because even me, as just the songs will only get to me if they're in the mainstream kind of thing. I was able to count up something between 10 and 12 Dua Lipa hits that you would just be familiar with without going to any effort at all. So I think that absolutely passes the test. And I've seen interviews where she's said, someone said to her, "Oh, Wednesday, June the 28th or whatever it is, or Friday, June the 28th. What are you doing?" And she immediately knew what that was. And any band that gets asked to do the headline slot at Glastonbury, they're not just turning up and phoning it in. They all get it. They all get that. You've been given this enormous platform, but also there's an expectation that you have to win people over a little bit because not everyone is paid to necessarily come and see you. So Dua Lipa, I think, absolutely gets it, and I think will provide the biggest TV moment, perhaps tying with Coldplay, that you'll see on the screens this year.
Do you think this is a good year, music-wise, headliner-wise? Because I feel like there's been a lot of conversation around that this year.
Glastonbury is a number of different things to a number of different people. So a little bit of what I touched on earlier with the 1,000 acts, 100 stages, 200,000 people. Everyone's going to have a different assessment. And I've always thought with that many acts on the lineup, if you can't find a load of things that you want to watch, then you need to broaden your horizons. And that's what I'm doing this year. So I'll totally level with you. The lineup as it stands isn't one of the ones that grabs me. And that is something that, much like the tide coming in and going out before, is something that happens on a personal basis. You keep coming back because you know that you'll love the festival. And actually, weirdly, if there aren't 50 things that you want to see every day, that's quite nice because it means you can do all the other stuff. You can go and chat to people and do some woodworking and go and watch some poetry and go to the comedy tent and all these other things which you don't see on telly. So that's actually quite freeing. But in the same way that last year grabbed me as a lineup, and it didn't grab everyone, but I saw a load of my favourite bands. There was Guns N' Roses. There was Texas, I'd always wanted to see. Manic Street Preachers on there, all these great, rock bands. At the same time this year, this isn't a lineup year for me. But when I speak to people that are younger than myself, a lot of them are quite excited about it. And that is a good thing, because if you keep catering to the same people that have been a million times before, you just get a diminishing circle.
Yeah.
Every few years, a few people will drop out and you end up with nothing. But you need to bring in new blood. And in the same way in 2004, putting bands like Muse on the lineup grabbed me. In 2024, putting Scissor on the lineup is going to grab the new Glastonbury goers that are going to take the thing forward, and will be talking about it themselves in 20 years' time.
I'm obsessed with SZA, and I have seen her live before at a festival, and she is brilliant. So
break
go
it
see
down
her.
for me. Assume that I know nothing about SZA, which wouldn't be a stretch of the truth. What is it? Tell us about it.
It's very confessional, like hyper specific songwriting that I love. It's very honest. It's very raw, and then she has the actual voice to back it up. And her latest record is very kind of playing with different kinds of genres in a way that's really interesting. She's a song on there that's like borderline emo, kind of pop punk, and it's just kind of lost in the middle of all these other like pop, R&B, hip hop tracks. But it doesn't come across as like weird. It is weird, but like it's good. She's kind of weird, but she's still. I think
the great artists always genre hop a little bit, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. Who stands out for you over the years as like brilliant, perfect headliner, no notes, stays in your memory forever? It's the one that you talk about at parties or wherever, when you're reminiscing, you're like, wow, I'm so glad I was there for that.
Two answers to that question. One is that first year Muse concert, 2004. I was back in those days. I used to go and stand down the front, and I'd get there about 10 o'clock in the morning, ration out one bottle of drink for the whole day, and I would just stand there until midnight. So you'd be there for like 14 hours or something. And then, but ultimately it meant you were right down the front center. And it was before they had all these kind of crush control things in the crowd. So you had 100,000 people ramming you into the barrier. So which was kind of a little bit dicey, but it did make the concert very, very intense. And it just, it's capturing Muse kind of at the, kind of one of their hottest career moments. And it was just incredible. And it was so immersive. And I'm so glad they actually brought that show out on DVD afterwards. And, my memories of it matched that show. Unfortunately, I only have like 2 photos of it because I had, this will age me, but I had like a disposable camera that year. And the photos were pretty terrible. And also that year, Paul McCartney, both in 2004 and 2022 or 23, 2022, both of those gigs were just amazing. And for me, there is, in terms of seeing the right thing in the right situation, seeing a Beatle at the world's premier music festival, A, it's the ingredients for a great thing, but B, it delivered a truly amazing thing on both times that he played. And I just don't think that you can top that. You know, the Beatles are so huge for me and for so many other people. There's barely a musical act around today that doesn't in some way, directly or indirectly, owe them a debt. And it was at Glastonbury, and it was incredible. And I'm so glad I got to see him both times.
There have been lots of rumours over the last, I would say, 2 years about a certain Miss Taylor Swift potentially headlining at some point.
Yeah.
And I think they're still...
actually headlining at one point, but
yeah.
We'll get into that, yeah.
What do you make of that? Could you still see it happening? How do you think that would work, given, like, because, you know, we talk about Glastonbury, it's like one of the biggest stages in the world, obviously, are headlining. Lots and lots of people are going to go. There's 200,000 people going to the festival as it is. Where she is now as an artist is bonkers. Does it work? Would it work for you? Can you see it happening? Tell me.
Taylor Swift was on the lineup, and as soon as I tell you when this was, you'll work out exactly what happened. So in 2019, they released the lineup poster for Glastonbury, I think, or was it in 2019 or early 2020? And on it, on the whatever night it was, one of the weekend nights was Taylor Swift headlining. Now, obviously, every single thing that anyone planned in 2020 past about, the end of February pretty much got cancelled. And with Glastonbury, the 2020 festival did get cancelled because of COVID, which was, I think that was what, when they cancelled that, there was such a huge thing. Because I think we take for granted that, yes, festivals and events were cancelled. But back then, to cancel something of that magnitude took bravery, because whatever you do, it's going to blow back on you in some way.
Yeah.
And they cancelled the 2020 festival, and they pretty much moved all the artists over to 2021 and said, don't worry, guys, we'll come back and we'll do it next year. And, COVID obviously was still very much the thing. And they, for probably the first time, cancelled it for 2 years on the trot, or at least for a very first time in a long time. I think Taylor Swift was on that sort of 2021 festival and then never came back for 2022. Most of the acts did. So I think Kendrick Lamar was one. I think Paul McCartney. Most of the runners and riders that were on that original lineup came back and sort of made good. Taylor Swift didn't. And, she doesn't have to. She's not obliged to. But I was talking to a friend about this the other day. And even though Taylor Swift was a big artist then, I think she's, crossed into another level of stardom now. And aside from the scheduling side of things, I'm not sure that they could afford her. So she'd need to be doing it almost for the love and exposure, or perhaps, coming back at a point in her career where, the gig tickets aren't flying off the shelves in quite the way that they are today, which could happen, but probably won't happen for a very long time. So it was the great gig that sort of didn't happen, was Taylor Swift. And I think people, I think that would have been one of those big pop Glastonbury moments for sure. And hopefully it will happen one day. And she'll have both people, if it does, she'll have people going that are both committed fans and also probably convert a lot of people if there's anyone left to convert at that point. But it's the great one that got away at the moment.
I think she will do it. I think the money thing is a great point, but she is such a career weirdo accolade person that I think she wants to do it. I think she's waiting for all the re-records to be done, which is why I'm kind of like 2025, maybe? I don't know. Do you have any inclination? I know 2024 hasn't even happened yet, but 2025, do you have any inclinations as to we might see headlining? Any hunches?
No idea. And no, I just don't. And I try not to. I think, again, I try not to sort of hope for things because it's a lot easier strategy to just take what you get with Glastonbury and go out there and enjoy it and just apply yourself really well to it. Because I'm really fortunate in that, having gone to these things for 20 years and been to a load of gigs besides, I've pretty much gotten to see everyone that I have ever wanted to watch live, which is, a really fortunate position to be in. If Taylor Swift did it, I'd absolutely go and watch her. There's a few acts that I still want to see, like Eminem is one that's always eluded me. But I've pretty much seen everyone I want to see, which now is just, it's almost like it's not like I've retired, but it's like my attendance at festivals doesn't hinge or hang on who's announced for them. And not that it ever particularly did, but, especially now.
What does the future hold for Glastonbury, do you reckon?
It's a tough one because what I was saying before about no one would ever plan a festival like Glastonbury in the situation that it's in means that it must be so difficult to put it on year after year after year. They have, pretty much announced that they're taking 2026 off. And I don't blame them because Glastonbury is an amazing thing to come to, but I would hate for it to be happening in my backyard. If it was me putting it on, if it was my family, I wouldn't sleep. And I'd be getting towards every summer thinking, oh God, here it comes. So I don't blame them for wanting to take a year off and just having a June where it's not happening. They have always said that it won't go on forever. To what extent they are closer to the end than the beginning, if at all, I don't know. People always ask for the way that tickets are distributed to change. And I've not seen anyone propose a system that is better than what they have now. Sometimes people would say, the ticket is really competitive to get tickets. It should be a ballot. And I do have some sympathy with that. But also at the same time, I think if it was a ballot, people would just sort of enter, for the sake of it. And it would almost be a festival full of people that, weren't that bothered or had a mixture of being bothered and not.
Dan, this has been such a pleasure. I hope you have the best time at Glastonbury this year, and maybe I'll see you there one year. I'm not sure when, I'm not sure how, but I will see you there. I'm determined now. For anyone that's looking to find out more, follow you, share a lot of really good tips, even just for camping and festivals in general, which I would recommend. We have a lot of festivals here in Ireland, as you mentioned. Electric Picnic is coming up, and we need your wisdom. Where can people find you?
Thank you, Fionnuala. And so I've done a whole load of tips about Glastonbury, what to pack, potentially what to do there, what's in the lineup. And some people agree with them and some don't, which is fun as well.
That's TikTok. That's TikTok.
That's TikTok. That is indeed TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. And I'm on all social networks under Dan Thomas UK. So DANTHOMAS UK. If you search for those on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you will find all the same videos, and you can go and check me out there. And the rest of the time, the rest of the year, when I'm not talking about Glastonbury, which probably takes about half of it, I'm traveling around the world as well. And actually, I did a series of videos in Ireland just over the end of last year, so I don't know if you saw those.
I didn't. Oh my God, I must go back and watch them. I'd watched your Japan ones, but I'm going to go back and watch the Ireland ones. I did
a full circuit of the whole island, from Dublin round to Belfast, but clockwise.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to go immediately watch them now. I'm going to leave you to continue to get ready for Glastonbury in the meantime. Dan Thomas, thank you so much for joining me on Flop Culture. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Big thank you to Dan Thomas. I will leave all of his links below. He's at Glastonbury right now. As we speak, he's there. He's been sharing loads of content from there. So be sure to follow along. I find it fascinating as someone, again, as I said, I'm not sure if I'll ever make the festival. I hope I do. But just to get an insight even to like the logistics and just how gargantuan a site it is and the preparedness you kind of have to be depending on what approach you're taking to the festival, I find it fascinating. Some of the other flops we didn't touch on from a music perspective, The Killers in 2007, a lot of bad sound issues. When you look up like Glastonbury kind of bad moments, a lot of the ones that come up are usually ones that are due to mainly affected by bad sound issues more than anything else. It's not really necessarily an issue with the act or anything else, with a few exceptions, obviously. So The Killers in 2007, really bad sound issues. You had U2 headline in 2011. They were actually supposed to perform in 2010, but they had to cancel because of Bono's back injury. And then when they did take the stage in 2011, very heavy rain, lots of technical issues. I think fans found it a little bit underwhelming. In fairness, to their credit, you can't control the rain. You know what I mean? That's an uncontrollable factor when it comes to a set. Did we know Ashley Simpson played Glastonbury? I must ask Dan if this was the first year he went. Ashley Simpson performed in 2004. Criticised for poor vocal performance, lack of stage presence. A lot of negative reviews for that one. Morrissey, of course, 2011. Very polarising. That's an interesting word to use. He just was ranting in between about meat eating, lots of other topics. Apparently the music was, when he was singing and doing music, that was fine. It was just when he was talking, which is generally how people feel about me. So there you go. Glastonbury, have you ever been? Any highlights, lowlights you'd like to share with me? Let me know. It's helloflopculture@gmail.com. Finally, top of the flops this week.
You're a flop.
Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, they're getting back together, not for a Forrest Gump sequel, but for something much worse, actually. It's a drama called Here, which is filmed in one position in a house and kind of charts their life together, which you hear that and you're like, that's a really interesting premise. Like, to describe it kind of more clearly, the camera is set up in a corner of the house and it's just facing that angle into the house. The camera never moves. So like it's in a living room. So we'll say you're watching them, you know, celebrate things, they're talking, whatever, as people do in sitting rooms generally. But you hear that and you're like, I'm not seeing the issue, Fionnuala. The issue is that the two of them have been de-aged, right? For the purposes of this film, to chart them throughout their lives. And I'm not against AI overall. I am a little bit scared of it. I think in the right hands and used responsibly, I think it could ultimately be good for people. But the issue is I feel like it's not, like people aren't thinking about it like that. And ultimately, it's now threatening people's livelihoods, including mine to a degree, when really the goal of AI should be about making all of our lives easier, not replacing our lives. But anyway, and I will say, look, I know the de-aging stuff has been used before. It was used in that Indiana Jones and it was used in something else that's escaping me. The more recent Indiana Jones and something else. If you look at the photos for this, and again, podcasting, not a visual medium, so you're just going to have to take my word for it and you're going to have to look up the photos. They look weird. It just doesn't look real. And all the comments on every publication that are talking about this say as much. Like, they just look weird. And I get the whole thing of like, because some people are commenting being like, geez, would you not hire Colin Hanks? He's only short of a bit of work, Colin Hanks, Tom Hanks' son, because they are kind of head off each other and they probably would have gotten away with it. Like, I get the feat of wanting it to be the same actor for the whole thing, because you're going to notice a recast, even if they are related and no matter how closely they look or whatever. It's just not, it's not that impressive to me, and it takes me out of the moment. It takes me out of the moment when it's someone like Tom Hanks, who has had such a long, high-profile career. We're all intimately familiar with what he looks like. And you see, like, young... It's not like watching Forrest Gump where it's like he is that age and it's in that time. We're looking at Forrest Gump age, Tom Hanks in modern times. But our eyes and brains are already accustomed to how Tom Hanks looks as old. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm completely on the wrong side of this. Maybe people want to argue against me on this. I don't know. Please let me know what you think. Do you think this could work? Are you excited about this in any way? I'll say again, I think this is an interesting concept for a film. In terms of the way it's shot and all, the de-aging is freaking my nut. And I'm worried about what it means for future films, future creative projects. Like, I don't know. Anyway, that's it for me this week. If you're on Spotify, you can actually let me know who you think is top of the flops this week. I always leave that as a poll at the end of every episode. So be sure to get in touch there. I mentioned Patreon. I'm recording with Owen Keane this week, our first episode of the new season of Pop Culture on Sex and the City. Myself and Patrick Wilson McCarthy will also be chatting about who is top of the flops so far for 2024. Maybe do some prep for some live shows, who knows? Recording them this week, but until then, we also have a really good episode up with the music journalist and writer Michael Cragg, all about charts, what's going on with the charts, why the charts are getting so competitive, what competitive charts means for pop music overall. It's a really good episode, really interesting. Go listen. I want to shout out some recent patrons. Hello to Sinead Casey. Sinead signed up for a whole year. You can get annual membership if you want to do that, or gift someone an annual membership for the Patreon. That would be nice, wouldn't it? 3 bonus episodes a month all year. Sign me up, girls. It's also a little bit cheaper if you sign up annually. Hello to Sinead Casey. Once again, thank you so much for signing up for the year. Hello to Abby. Hello, Abby. Hope you're well. If you want to hear anything, let me know. Get in touch. Happy to have you. Hello to Connor. So happy to have you. Thank you for signing up. I hope you're really well. I hope you're having a great Pride. And hello to Flemish. Final patron this month. Great to have you. As always, if there's anything you'd like to hear, it's helloflopculture@gmail.com. We are on social media at flopculture_pod. Come over, follow us, DM us, keep up with us. We love to have you. Please rate and review the show wherever you rate and review podcasts. It helps people find the podcast. and it makes me really happy. Editing this week has been done by the wonderful Adam Shanahan. Until next time, bye-bye.